that he confessed to his treachery. The reason he confessed was because he was granted immunity.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 1 o'clock on Wednesday, the 12th of February. I'm Emily Carver.
And I'm Tom Harwood.
Well, the judge rules that a Gazan family can settle in the UK under a scheme meant for Ukrainian refugees. We're going to be joined by former Home Secretary Suella Braverman as the Tories accuse the government of allowing enormous numbers of people to exploit our laws.
Elsewhere, is Donald Trump hitting his closest allies the hardest? That's the claim of Lib Dem leader Sir Ed Davey as he condemned tariffs against steel and aluminium.
And this, of course, comes as Heathrow announces a significant commitment by the airport to UK Steel at Scunthorpe's British Steelworks as part of its expansion plans. We'll be hearing from the CEO very shortly.
And I hear you're a racist now, Father. Well, Channel 4 bosses are slammed after adding a trigger warning to Father Ted for racial impersonations and language. This all comes as Disney embarks on a bonfire of woke policy over in the United States. Is it time to take a leaf from the Americans?
Tom almost pronounced aluminum, didn't you?
Yeah, I'm not emigrating. I just want to put that out there. And I do believe in putting a U in the word colour. I do believe that I walk on a pavement, not a sidewalk. I put my rubbish in the bin, not the trash can. But I did accidentally say aluminium rather than aluminium.
Yourself.
I stopped myself halfway through. I betrayed my country. I can only apologise.
So interesting exchange in PMQs though about this Gaza refugee issue.
Yeah.
I mean, this extraordinary ruling from this particular judge, Hugo Benedict Norton Taylor is his name.
Salt of the earth.
Salt of the earth chap, yes. His father actually was a Guardian journalist and likes to tweet about immigration and things like this. But anyway...
you know, Emily, a lot of people are going to tell you off for this.
Why?
Because we're not allowed to criticise judges.
Right.
They're supposed to be above the fray.
Keir Starmer did. He said it was the wrong decision.
And yet, when judges become so political, when they're in effect making political decisions, is it right that no one can criticise what they do and the action that they take?
Yeah, I don't believe judges should be beyond reproach, and I doubt many of you at home do either. You know, it's like any other job. Obviously, it's a huge responsibility, and you have to do a lot of work to get to that position. But like any job, people can make mistakes.
Oh, certainly, and it seems utterly extraordinary, this decision. And to his credit, the Prime Minister clearly anticipated this line of questioning and did have some pretty strong batting strikes to come back to those polls.
He did not answer that question, did he, about whether the government is going to be appealing this ruling. It did happen a little while ago, last year, I believe. But are they going to appeal this? Because they say, oh, we're going to change the law. How long is that going to take, really? Well, let us know what you make of it. gbnews.com/your say. We are going to be speaking to Suella Braverman very shortly, but it's your headlines with Aaron Armstrong.
Very good afternoon to you. 3 minutes past 1. Let's get you up to date with the top stories. Sir Keir Starmer and the leader of the opposition have clashed over immigration at Prime Minister's questions. The Conservative leader, Kemi Badenoch, repeatedly asked the PM why a Gazan family of 6 was allowed to come to the UK under a scheme intended for Ukrainians. Well, the Home Office says it rigorously contested 2 appeals at tribunal hearings after the family's application to live in the UK was initially refused. The second appeal was allowed on the grounds of Article 8 of the European Convention on Human Rights, which protects the right to family life.
There are millions of people all around the world in terrible situations. We cannot help them all, and we certainly cannot bring them all here. Will he commit to bringing forward that new legislation or amending his borders bill?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I've already said the Home Secretary has already got a team working on closing this loophole. We don't need to wait for that. We're getting on with that because we're taking control. They lost control of immigration. We had nearly 1 million people come into this country, had an open borders experiment. On a Monday of this week, they voted against increased powers to deal with those that are running the vile trade of people smuggling. Same old Tories, open borders, empty promises.
Well, the Home Office has tightened the rules on becoming a British citizen, making it almost impossible for those arriving on small boats to apply successfully. Previously, refugees who had reached the UK by irregular routes could apply, but only after being in the country for 10 years. New guidance now advises authorities to reject applications if that person arrived illegally. It could prevent thousands of refugees from becoming British citizens despite having been granted asylum. A Christian school worker who was dismissed after criticising plans to teach primary school children about LGBTQ+ relationships has won a Court of Appeal battle related to her dismissal. Christy Higgs lost her role at Farmers School in Fairford, Gloucestershire in 2019 after sharing posts with around 100 friends on Facebook. One referred to brainwashing our children, another to suppressing Christianity and removing it from the public arena. Well, in the latest stage of her years-long legal battle, 3 judges ruled in her favour, finding a previous appeal decision, which sent the case back to an employment tribunal, was unlawfully discriminatory. Ms Higgs says it's a victory for free speech.
Today's judgment is as important for free speech as it is for freedom of religion. Employers will no longer be able to rely on their theoretical fears of reputational damage or subjective concerns about causing offence to discipline employees for exercising their fundamental freedom to express their deeply held beliefs.
Meanwhile, there's growing concern for the ceasefire in Gaza after the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said the deal will end if Hamas fails to release hostages by midday on Saturday. Speaking after President Trump threatened to let hell break out in Gaza if dozens of hostages aren't freed, Mr Netanyahu did not specify how many people he expected to be handed over, but said he has ordered forces to gather in and around the Strip in readiness. Hamas claims Israel's broken the terms of the ceasefire by blocking humanitarian aid, which Israel denies. Heathrow Airport's set to confirm a multi-billion-pound expansion to increase capacity as it prepares to build a third runway. Terminals 2 and 5 will be expanded, the layout of the airfield reconfigured, and investment also put into boost bus and coach connections. It's separate from a new runway, this development. It will be privately funded, so airlines and customers will face higher costs. It follows a speech by Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, last month, giving her support to a third runway. Elon Musk has denied leading a hostile takeover of the US government on a surprise first appearance at the White House. The world's richest man joined Donald Trump in the Oval Office as the US president signed an executive order allowing Mr Musk and his Department of Efficiency to make sweeping cuts to the size and spending of federal government. Well, Musk, who is unelected, and his agency have been criticised for a lack of transparency, but he strongly defended his plans.
If the bureaucracy is in charge, and then what meaning does democracy actually have? If the people cannot vote and have their will be decided by their elected representatives in the form of the president and the Senate and the House, then we don't live in a democracy, we live in a bureaucracy.
And King Charles will host a sleepover for political leaders at Windsor Castle. Charles is believed to have invited the Prime Minister as well as First Ministers from the devolved nations for a dinner later. Some of those leaders will stay overnight and also have breakfast in the morning. It will be seen as Charles' second intervention in politics in a week, after Sir Keir Starmer and Angela Rayner joined him on a rare joint engagement to see a housing project. And that's it for the moment. I'll be back with more in about half an hour's time.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 9 minutes past 1. Now, the floodgates could open to a wave of refugees from Gaza. That's the warning from the Home Office after a Palestinian family was granted the right to settle in the United Kingdom under a scheme set up for Ukrainian refugees.
Yes, so after initially being rebuffed, a judge called Hugo Norton-Taylor ruled that the family had the right to come to the United Kingdom on the basis of their right to a family life under the European Convention on Human Rights.
He also ruled that the family's specific situation outweighed the public interest in keeping to British immigration rules.
Well, during Prime Minister's questions, Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch asked Sir Keir Starmer if the government was planning to appeal the judge's decision to allow this Gazan family to settle in the United Kingdom. Here's the Prime Minister's response.
Mr. Speaker, let me be clear. I do not agree with the decision. She's right. It's the wrong decision. She hasn't quite done her homework because the decision in question was taken under the last government, according to the legal framework for the last government. But, Mr. Speaker, let me be clear. It should be Parliament that makes the rules on immigration. It should be the government that makes the policy. That is the principle, and the Home Secretary is already looking at the legal loophole which we need to close in this particular case.
Well, let's go live to Westminster Hall now to speak with our political editor, Christopher Hope. Christopher, you were in the chamber for that exchange. It was a pretty feisty back and forth.
Lost sound.
Oh, I'm going to see. I think we've got some communication. Sorry.
No, I'm okay now. Sorry, all okay now, Tom, apologies. No, I call that definitely for Sir Keir Starmer. From the very beginning, he said he'll look to close the loophole. Now, we've been in a briefing just now with the PM's official spokesman and his press secretary. That's broken up now. They are saying there they will look at changing the law, if necessary, to stop Gazans using the Ukrainian route to come to the UK. What is not clear is whether the government is going to appeal that ruling. And also, the Tories are saying that ruling did happen under this government, maybe in January. So I'm getting the data established from the Tory party. They're saying that ruling was under this government rather than the previous government, as you heard Sir Keir Starmer say in the House of Commons. But I think generally it was a win for Sir Keir Starmer. Kemi Badenoch gets 6 questions into the Prime Minister. On the very first one, he said, I'm going to close this loophole, and that really left her slightly floundering to land a blow. After that, as she interrogated the issue of immigration, it allowed Sir Keir Starmer to say, well, on Monday, the Tories and Reform UK, he said twice in answers, and Reform UK, he said twice, they voted to oppose attempts to control illegal migration by this government. I thought finally also this issue of this border czar who has been working from Finland. Now, it's clear that what happened was he told the committee yesterday he'll be working from Finland if he gets a job. The Tories leapt on that as a work-from-home story, and then in PMQs today, the PM was able to say he's done that for 5 years, going back into the last Tory government. And in fact, from today, he'll be working in the UK. And I've just clarified, he'll be working in the office in the UK. Obviously, some phone calls look like they took place between that individual from yesterday and today from number 10, but clearly a win for the Prime Minister today in PMQs.
Yeah, I mean, Christopher, Keir Starmer didn't answer the question as to whether he would appeal this, whether the Home Office would appeal this ruling. And he didn't exactly say what loophole he would close. Do you have any idea?
No. No, and we asked that exact question, Emily, as you might expect, of the PM's spokesman and his press secretary. They said they're looking at the whole issue. They're going to make sure it doesn't happen any further. He wouldn't say if the government would appeal that. I think they're looking into the case as soon as they can. And we're told by the Tories it did happen quite recently under this Labour government. That was disputed in the chamber by Sir Keir Starmer. He may have to correct the record if that's proved to be wrong. But well, I think what's interesting is they're on the front foot here. They clearly saw a weakness, a European Convention of Court of Human Rights weakness they could attack Keir Starmer on, and he saw it coming and was able to knock that out the park, it seems. The point about appealing this issue is not yet clarified from the...
Christopher, thank you very much indeed. Sorry to cut you off there. We're going to go live to the House of Commons where Security Minister Dan Jarvis is giving a statement on Damus.
The assessment in terms of the perpetrators' vulnerabilities was problematic, and this ultimately led to questionable decision-making and suboptimal handling of the case during the time he was engaged with Prevent and Channel. It identified that the vulnerability assessment framework was not followed, with the perpetrator's symptoms being prioritised over addressing the underlying causes of his vulnerabilities. The reviewer ultimately found that while Prevent policy and guidance at the time was mostly followed, the case was exited from Prevent too quickly. The reviewer identified 6 issues, namely that the support given did not tackle all of the vulnerabilities identified, record keeping was problematic, and the rationale for certain decisions was not explicit. Responsibilities between police and the local authority were blurred. The tool used for identifying an individual's vulnerability to radicalisation was outdated. The school that made the referral to Prevent should have been involved in discussions to help determine risk and appropriate support. And the tasking of the intervention provider was problematic, with a miscommunication leading to only 1 session being provided instead of 2. The reviewer then examined how far changes in the Prevent programme since 2016 had addressed these issues. The reviewer recognised the significant changes that had been made to Prevent since the perpetrator was managed, in particular the introduction of the statutory prevent and channel duties under the Counter-Terrorism and Security Act of 2015. The reviewer concluded that over the intervening period there have been considerable changes to policy and guidance for both the police and the wider Prevent arena, including channel. Whilst a number of the issues in the perpetrator's case would most likely not be repeated today, there were still a number of areas which could be considered as requiring further work in order to mitigate against future failures. The reviewer made 4 recommendations for actions to further strengthen Prevent. These were to improve the referral process, strengthen the initial intelligence assessment process, update the tool used to identify vulnerability to being drawn into terrorism, and to not reduce data retention periods. Since the report, the Home Office and Counter-Terrorism Policing have fully implemented all 4 recommendations. First, a single national referral form was launched to encourage a consistent approach to referrals, building this into new training packages and mandating its use via statutory guidance. Second, training has been delivered to police staff to strengthen the initial intelligence check stage, ensuring their understanding of Prevent is robust. Third, a new Prevent assessment framework was rolled out in September of 2024. This replaces the tools previously used to assess all referrals and cases in the Prevent system. And fourth, data retention periods were fully reviewed in 2023, and a joint decision was taken by the Home Office and Counter-Terrorism Policing to maintain retention review periods at 6 years or 6 years after the 12-month review for channel cases. In addition to the publication of the Prevent Learning Review, we recognise the significant concerns that remain over the way in which Prevent dealt with the perpetrator, as well as the need to ensure that the recommendations it suggested for improving the scheme have been properly implemented. Last week, I set out to the House a series of new reforms instituted by the government to strengthen the Prevent programme, recognising the vital work done by officers across the country to keep people safe. That included the creation of a new independent Prevent Commissioner. And I can today inform the House that the Home Secretary has asked the Prevent Commissioner to review the Prevent programme's interactions with the perpetrator in this case and ensure the implementation of all relevant recommendations. We will ensure that the Amis family have the support they need to engage with the Prevent Commissioner in this work so that they can have confidence that it will get to the truth about any failings in the scheme. Madam Deputy Speaker, 2 further important issues have been raised which are relevant to this case: local policing and members' security. On local policing, concerns have been raised by the Amis family about the way in which Essex Police handled this case. A complaint has been made and referred back to the local force by the IOPC for consideration. That process must be allowed to follow its course. However, I can inform the House that the Home Secretary has written to the Chief Constable and the Police and Crime Commissioner of Essex Police, asking them to set out how the investigation will be conducted and to be kept updated as the investigation progresses. Secondly, on members' security, this is something that the Home Secretary and I care deeply about, and I know that it is a matter to which Mr. Speaker attaches the utmost importance, as will all members right across this House. A review of security measures for MPs commissioned under the previous government has concluded, and all the recommendations have been implemented. We must ensure that the learnings from this case have been properly implemented, and I want to take this opportunity to thank Mr. Speaker for his continued leadership on these matters. The Speakers' Conference is specifically considering what reforms are necessary to further improve MPs' security and safety. This is another important step. And the Leader of the House, the Home Secretary and myself look forward to working closely with the Speaker and with all members to ensure that the facts of the appalling murder of Sir David are properly considered as part of the Speakers' Conference work, and that the Parliamentary Security Department implements the recommendations it made following the review it conducted into the aftermath of Sir David's death. I'm also grateful to previous Home Secretaries and Security Ministers for their efforts in this area. Our democracy is precious, and this government will defend it against any and all threats, not least through the Defending Democracy Task Force, where we are mounting a whole-of-government response to combat these threats, including ensuring that elected representatives can perform their duties safely and without fear. Madam Deputy Speaker, to conclude, I want to pay tribute once more to Sir David. He was a giant of this House, and we miss him dearly. In all that he did, Sir David epitomised public service at its best. It is beyond a tragedy that we can no longer seek his advice or rely on his wisdom. We can, though, follow his example and devote ourselves every day to the task of building a better and safer Britain. That is our shared challenge, Madam Deputy Speaker, and under this government, nothing will matter more. I commend this statement to the House.
I call Chris Phillips, Shadow Minister.
Thank you. Well, we've been listening to the Security Minister talk about, of course, this review into the Prevent system, which clearly let down the family of Sir David Amess in that brutal Islamist terrorist attack.
Absolutely, but we're going to come back to the studio now and continue our discussion about this extraordinary court ruling for a Gazan family to resettle in the United Kingdom through the Ukrainian resettlement scheme. Well, we're joined by former Home Secretary Suella Braverman in the studio with us. Suella, just your initial thoughts on what we've all learnt today.
Well, it's an egregious example of human rights gone wrong. And this case is a very bad decision, and it presents very terrible consequences potentially for our immigration system. The basis upon which this judge has reached his conclusion is flawed, and it represents a constitutional abomination, frankly, a great and bad example of judicial overreach.
And yet, what the judge would say is he's acting within the parameters that the legal framework of this country provides him. I mean, he appeals to treaties that we have signed, conventions that we are a party to. Is this the fault of the judge or the law?
A combination. But what he said that the Ukrainian refugee scheme is a sufficient legal basis to justify a non-Ukrainian, a Palestinian Gazan family, to come and claim refugee status in the UK. It doesn't make any logical sense. It doesn't make any legal sense, constitutional sense. And it is incredibly dangerous because it does now mean that anyone from any war zone around the world, of which there are many, and there are many millions of people in vulnerable, difficult situations, this potentially opens the doors to them piggybacking onto any kind of refugee scheme we have and coming into the UK. That's not what Parliament determined. That's not what our law says, and it's not what the British people want.
And that's the crucial point, isn't it? It should be up to Parliament and the government to decide what our immigration policy is. This is essentially, in my view, a judge taking it upon himself to essentially rewrite our immigration laws. It's quite extraordinary.
Absolutely. He has usurped the role of Parliament and the executive, and he's writing and inserting his own idea of what the law should say. That is not the role of the judiciary in our separation of powers that makes up our constitution. The judges are there to check that our laws are applied properly, not write the laws. And that's why there must be, I think, an avenue to challenge this decision through judicial review. This is an upper-tier tribunal. I've got to say, before I was Home Secretary, I was Attorney General, grappling with these laws, and before that I was a barrister defending the Home Office in cases precisely like this, relating to immigration law. And unfortunately, there are lots of lawyers like this and judges like this who slavishly worship the mantra of human rights and are so keen to inject human rights claims into every aspect of our immigration law, such that we've lost control of our borders. The solution, legally and politically, is that we need to scrap the HRA, the Human Rights Act, and come out of the European Convention of Human Rights.
Now, the first question in Prime Minister's questions was, of course, on this issue. Kemi Badenoch asked the Prime Minister, would he appeal this ruling? He didn't answer whether or not he would. I mean, obviously he would have to take advice from the Attorney-General, Lord Hermer, who has come under a lot of heat at the moment. They go way back. They were, of course, senior lawyers together, cases together. And clearly both Lord Hermer and the Prime Minister hold international law and the European Court of Human Rights and conventional human rights specifically in very high esteem. Might the reason the Prime Minister didn't answer that first question from Kemi Badenoch be that he hasn't yet had the go-ahead from Lord Hermer? Is that how the Attorney-General system sort of works?
Well, he wouldn't necessarily need the advice of the Attorney-General, actually. As Home Secretary, I was involved in thousands of cases, and we have armies of lawyers within the Home Office. We have our own barristers, we have First Treasury Counsel, we have our own lawyers within the Home Office who will be reviewing this case and will be taking their own legal advice and legal view on whether to challenge it. My prima facie view, just having read the reports, is that actually there would be an avenue through judicial review to challenge this judgment and get a more senior, more experienced judge to correct it.
And in terms of what the Home Office can do at this stage, Keir Starmer has said that he's not happy with this ruling. He thinks it was the wrong one, so he does not back the judge in this decision. We don't yet know what the appeal process will be, but what can the Home Office do in these circumstances? Because this isn't the first of this type of case where people are shocked.
Yeah, well, I think that the Home Office does need to explore the avenue of judicial review, the broad judicial review claims that the Home Office can bring to challenge this in the High Court and in our broader courts. I think, this closing the legal loophole, frankly, I think is a little bit too little too late. Yes, we can change the law, but we shouldn't have to. The judge has been extremely creative in saying that just because Parliament didn't say something, it cannot be right that Parliament didn't want people to claim asylum through the Ukrainian scheme. That is not how our constitution operates, and it cannot be right that Parliament has to legislate for everything that cannot be as well as things that can be. So I think there's a very weak legal basis for this judgment. I think it should be challenged legally through the courts. But equally, if Keir Starmer was serious about what he's pledged today at the dispatch box, he's got a bill going through Parliament right now on border security. We just voted on it on Monday evening. A total waste of space, frankly. It's not worth the paper it's written on. But if he was serious, he could now lay an amendment to his own bill and say we pull out of the European Court of Human Rights, we scrap the Human Rights Act, and we properly take back control of our borders.
Of course, there's about a snowball's chance in hell that the Prime Minister would do that.
Just a question, do you think we should be taking any refugees from Gaza?
I personally don't think so. I think that, listen, my heart goes out to the many people, innocent people, who will have been killed in that heartbreaking battle. And there are many innocent Gazans who will have been killed in military action. But there are millions of people in war zones, in vulnerable conditions all over the world. It is not the UK's duty, morally, legally or politically, to open our arms to every single person who wants to come here. I'm afraid that is a harsh reality of life. We already already have taken many millions of people over the decades for humanitarian purposes. And in recent years, 500,000 people from Syria, from Ukraine, from Afghanistan. You know, we have a proud track record of extending the hand to those in war zones. I do think we have to draw a line. And given the global migration crisis and the numbers right now and the pressure on our resources, we need to put the British people first.
But isn't it the case that Parliament and the UK government signed up to the 1951 UN Refugee Convention? That's the convention that means that anyone in any of those war zones, as long as they make their way to the United Kingdom, can, under the terms of that convention, claim asylum in this country. It doesn't have a limit on it. It's functionally millions of people, hundreds of millions of people could theoretically claim under that convention, which we're still a party to.
There are 2 points there. First of all, the Refugee Convention, post-war documents that we signed up to at the international law level, only say that people have the right to claim asylum, not that they have the entitlement to be granted asylum. Claiming asylum means you can apply, but it is the final word, and the decision-making power rests with the democratically elected government of the day. So anyone can claim. The question is whether we grant them asylum. Secondly, I think we have to reimagine and review our relationship to international law. We've got Keir Starmer and Lord Hermer, who are the personification of the lefty lawyers who worship slavishly at the altar of international law. They put international law, which is in many ways an amorphous, vague concept, they put that above parliamentary supremacy. They put it above the will of democratically elected governments. They put it above the will of the British people. That's wrong. I think we need to reclaim our sovereignty in a much more muscular way and actually reject some of these outdated, outmoded norms of international law.
OK, well, on that note, we'll end our conversation. Suella Braverman, thank you very much indeed for coming into the studio, former Home Secretary and Attorney General, of course. Thank you very much.
Well, this is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News, and don't move a muscle. There's plenty more to come. Indeed, Heathrow. Yes, London's airport is undergoing a multi-billion-pound expansion. But could it actually help elsewhere in the country? And crucially, might it save British steel? We're live in Scunthorpe after your headlines.
Very good afternoon to you. It's just after 1:30. Our top stories. Sir Keir Starmer and the Leader of the Opposition have clashed over immigration at Prime Minister's questions, among other things. Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch repeatedly asked the Prime Minister why a Gazan family of 6 was allowed to come to the UK under a scheme intended for Ukrainians, and if that loophole would be closed.
This is a situation where we need to put our national interest before the ECHR. Does he agree that we should legislate even if lawyers warn that this might be incompatible with human rights law?
Prime Minister.
She complains about scripted answers and questions. Her script doesn't allow her to listen to the answer.
Prime Minister.
She asked me if we're going to change the law and close the loophole in question 1. I said yes. She asked me again in question 2, and I said yes. She asked me again in question 3. It's still yes.
Well, the parents and their 4 children fled Gaza after their home was destroyed by an Israeli airstrike. They applied for entry via the Ukraine scheme to join the father's brother, who's British and has lived here since 2007. Well, the Home Office says it rigorously contested 2 appeals at a tribunal after the family's application to live in the UK was initially refused. But the second appeal was allowed over the rights to a family life enshrined in the European Convention on Human Rights. A Christian school worker who was dismissed after criticising plans to teach primary school children about LGBTQ+ relationships has won a Court of Appeal battle related to her dismissal. Christy Higgs lost her role at Farmers School in Gloucestershire in 2019 after sharing posts with around 100 friends on Facebook. One referred to brainwashing her children, another to suppressing Christianity and removing it from the public arena. 3 judges today ruled in her favour, finding a previous appeal decision, which had sent the case back to an employment tribunal, was unlawfully discriminatory. Those are the headlines. I'll be back with more just after 2 o'clock.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Yes, it's time for your weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Another fairly glum day out there. A lot of cloud around. A few showers, but many places dry and again on the chilly side. If anything, tomorrow is going to be a little colder. High pressure sitting out to the east. The winds coming in from the east, from the North Sea. So feeling particularly fresh on these North Sea coasts. A lot of clouds smothering the UK, but we've got some breaks in the cloud across western Scotland. Some sunshine here. A few showers coming in on that easterly breeze across southeast Scotland, eastern parts of England into the Midlands, but they're pretty well scattered, certainly nothing too heavy. The odd flake of snow over the Pennines, but chiefly rain and drizzle. Temperatures a touch below average for the time of year and certainly feeling cold with that breeze on these North Sea coasts. That will continue as we go through this evening and overnight, as will the holes in the cloud across western Scotland. So here, temperatures pretty quickly getting back down below freezing. I think we'll see the cloud breaking up a little bit more as we go through the night as well. That will lead to a bit more in the way of frost overnight. Certainly as we go through this evening, though, it's just cloudy. A few more showers coming in, Lincolnshire, down across East Anglia, perhaps the odd one into Kent and across the Midlands, perhaps even as far as East Wales, but few and far between, and certainly fairly light, any of those showers that do come in. Through the night, not a great deal of change. As I mentioned, a few more breaks perhaps in the cloud, particularly across parts of Scotland, but also northwest England may see a few more breaks. So the blue on the chart there suggesting there will be a frost, certainly in rural parts. Towns and cities dropping to about 2 or 3 degrees Celsius. A colder feel, though, on Thursday. A few more breaks in the cloud. Better chance of seeing some sunny spells. Western parts of Wales, southwest England, northwest England, again, western Scotland also. Generally speaking, many central and eastern parts staying overcast. The odd light shower, but most places dry. The wind's a little lighter, but if anything, it will be a colder day tomorrow. Temperatures for many struggling at just 4 or 5 Celsius. Bye for now.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Russell Holding. In Aberdeenshire, the A90 is closed in both directions between the Thornton turnoff and the Crosspoles junction at Marykirk after an accident causing queues towards and away from Forfar. In Lancashire on the A56, there's a lane closed northbound for emergency repairs just after the Ramsbottom junction at Edenfield, causing delays towards the A680 Manchester Road. In Nottinghamshire on the A60, there are 2 lanes closed southbound after an accident on Mansfield Road at the junction with Cross Street in Arnold, causing delays. And there are a couple of problems in London. The A41 Finchley Road is blocked for an investigation near to St John's Wood Station, causing long delays on approaches to there. And the A124 is closed each way on Barking Road in East Ham after an accident causing delays. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Well, good afternoon, Britain. It's 1:36. Now, a review into the handling of Sir David Amos's murderer, Ali Harbi Ali, under the counter-terrorism programme PREVENT, found assessments were problematic and that his case was closed too quickly, according to Security Minister Dan Jarvis, who we just heard in the Commons.
Well, our national reporter Charlie Peters joins us now with the details. Charlie, what were these failures?
Well, they also found questionable decision-making taken by PREVENT, one of the lead sections of the government's counter-extremism programme. And we should start by saying that the publication of this sort of review is extremely rare, and it comes after the PREVENT Learning Review over the Southport murders by Axel Rudakabana was released last month. This just does not happen, and it's been pressured into the government into releasing this under, obviously, the guise of transparency to explain why this sort of tragedy happened, as the PREVENT programme comes under serious scrutiny. And as you just said, Tom and Emily, some of the failings that are going to be revealed by this learning review, announced in the House of Commons by the Security Minister Dan Jarvis, point towards suboptimal suboptimal decision making. One of the failures pointed to an error in admin, where a follow-up meeting with the Islamist murderer Ali Harbi Ali just wasn't organised. It wasn't scheduled. The members of the counter-extremism programme not going on to meet with him. So other problematic failings include that the case was exited from Prevent too quickly. When someone is identified, they make an assessment whether to advance them onto the next stage, which is Channel, which is when a counter-extremism officer will then meet with someone who's deemed to be vulnerable to becoming an extremist. But in this case, Ali Harbi Ali was exited from the counter-terrorism programme too quickly. Security Minister Dan Jarvis also said that the reviewer in this case found that the material reviewed, the assessment in terms of the perpetrator's vulnerabilities, was also problematic. This led to that questionable decision-making and, Mr Jarvis said, suboptimal handling of the case during the time when he was engaged with Prevent, which assesses the issue, and Channel, which is the programme when they actually engage with the person. Now, Mr Jarvis also said that this review identified that the vulnerability assessment framework was not followed, with the perpetrator's symptoms being prioritised over addressing the underlying causes of his vulnerability. The review also ultimately found that while Prevent policy and guidance at the time was mostly followed, the case was exited from Prevent too quickly, which could have led to some of the failures that obviously saw Sir David Amess murdered in that horrendously brutal fashion during a constituency surgery in the autumn of 2021. And it comes also this morning as Anna Firth, the former Southend West Conservative MP, said that the family of Sir David Amess and those of the Southport victims had been equally failed by Prevent. She has urged for the public inquiry that's now taking place into Prevent over the failures to deal with Axel Ruda-Cabana to be expanded to also include Prevent failures leading to the Sir David Amess murder. And I have to say, casting our minds back to that horrendous incident, so much of the political reaction at the time was not about the Islamist murder and the horrendous attack. It was about online safety. We saw people in the House of Commons talking about anonymity and abuse that MPs receive online, which I think some people close to Sir David have said was an attempt to sweep under the carpet some of the state failures that led to Sir David Amess's murder.
It was completely shocking. But Charlie, thanks so much for bringing us that report. And how chilling to see that CCTV footage of this Islamist murderer ambling about Westminster with a rucksack on. I mean, we know that he might have gone for Michael Gove. He ended up killing Sir David Amess, but it could have been anyone in Westminster that he tried to kill.
And as is so often the case, known to authorities, been referred to the Prevent programme. I mean, I do wonder sometimes, you know, has the Prevent programme had any notable successes? You know, how many people has it managed to de-radicalise? Can you de-radicalise through such a government programme?
No, big questions. Well, we're going to move on now because Heathrow Airport will undergo a multi-billion-pound expansion. The CEO claims the London airport is answering Chancellor Rachel Reeves' call to get Britain building by boosting capacity in some of the terminals, reconfiguring the layout. But crucially, this all requires steel.
Yes, it all requires steel, and hopefully British steel. Joining us now from Scunthorpe is our political correspondent, Catherine Forster. Catherine, tell us, why are you in Scunthorpe in particular?
Yes, good afternoon. I was a bit puzzled when Newsdesk told me yesterday that they were sending me up north to talk about Heathrow, but it is, as you say, all about steel. I'm here in Scunthorpe at the headquarters of British Steel. British Steel is a beleaguered industry at the moment, as we know, and that's before Trump comes along and slaps 25% tariffs on it. So it has a lot of issues, but Heathrow announcing a major expansion with or without the runway, the third runway potentially, which obviously going to take a long time to build if it can meet those strict environmental standards. In the meantime, they're having a big expansion of terminals 2 and 5, entirely funded by the private sector. They say that that is going to start this year, that it is going to bring the CEO of Heathrow told us tangible economic benefits this year. Of course, the government talks non-stop about growth, doesn't it? Growth is their #1 mission, but growth forecasts have plunged. So they desperately need to get things moving. Now, when the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, made that speech a couple of weeks ago, what struck me was that it all seemed to be about London and the southeast of England. And I thought to myself, well, what about the rest of the country? Now, they're saying here that actually 60% of the benefits of expansion of Heathrow will flow out to the rest of the country. And on steel particularly, I asked the Industry Minister, Sarah Jones, a little bit earlier. Let's have a look at what she had to say about that.
So this is jobs, this is supply chains. They will be buying products and services from around the UK this year, and that's good news. And that's why we're all here in Scunthorpe, where British Steel make some of the finest steel in the world. But we know that the steel industry has declined in recent years. Only a third of the steel that we use in the UK is made in the UK, and we want to turn that around. We know that's a difficult task. It's why we've got £2.5 billion steel fund to put into the right places to make sure we can revive the industry, make it more competitive. It's why we've got a steel council. It's why we're developing a steel strategy that we're going to publish in the spring. This can't come soon enough, but look, today Heathrow are saying let's buy British.
So buy British is the message. Heathrow have signed up to this UK steel charter. They're saying that as much as possible of the steel that they're going to use for the airport expansion will be British steel. Just to give you an example, Terminal 2 used 80,000 tonnes of the stuff just in Terminal 2. So to be honest, it's not very often we get a good news story. This is one of them.
Oh, Catherine Forster, thanks for being there live in Scunthorpe for us. Who'd have thought it? A London airport actually doing something for places that very much aren't London.
Yeah, thank you very much, Catherine. Got a spring in my step. 80,000 tonnes of steel. Yeah. That should support quite a few jobs.
I'd have thought so.
Same again? Yes, please. Why not?
Yeah, and this is the crucial thing as well. This isn't taxpayers' money buying this steel. This is private investment.
Yeah.
Delivering steel jobs in the UK.
Which makes it all that sweeter.
Oh, yeah. Well, if you're in search for some winter sun, here's the forecast for some of those top European holiday destinations.
You're looking happy.
Well, the forecast looks good.
So you've sorted the travel insurance then?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations forecast.
Heavy showers and thunderstorms affecting the Adriatic coastline, but elsewhere it should be mostly settled. These heavy showers could produce quite a lot of rain, particularly across southern parts of Croatia, Albania and parts of Greece. Some thunder and lightning mixed in with those too. But as we move our way further west across the Mediterranean, it's largely dominated by high pressure, so largely settled, particularly for Madeira and Tenerife, where we're likely to see the best of the sunshine. Showers continuing for a time before becoming more settled.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations forecast.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Underestimate what you did, because to do it in their backyard as well, I bet they weren't happy about it, were they, Brad?
No, definitely not. Well, it makes it all the more sweeter. So they're usually pretty dominant in a two-man event, but four-man's usually where we can challenge them. And yeah, we managed to do it yesterday and put down 2 solid runs. And yeah.
So yeah, funding was a big issue for us in the last quad, but
because of our results recently, we've picked up a lot more funding from UK Sport. So we're well funded now, and but yeah, the Bob is in the back of the van behind us, so we're driving it down to St Moritz as we speak. So yeah, that's how it all works in the background in bobsleigh.
Brad, you're the pilot, correct? So you're up front.
Yeah.
Now, what happens? I always wonder, because I remember seeing John Noakes on. Do you remember John Noakes on Blue Peter when he fell out of the Bob and he ended up showing the back of his backside on TV because he had a big scar on there? What? So you've got the brake man. You're at the front. So where are you then, Aaron? Are you what number are you?
So I'm number 3. Yeah.
Right. So what do you do there? Is it just a matter of it's the running power is what it's all about to get off to a good start, and then you can sit and enjoy the ride?
Yeah, that's it. So for number 2 and myself, number 3, it's all about getting that Bob off the line and then just zipping it up to as high a speed as we can, basically. Yeah. Getting in, staying low, having good aerodynamics and staying still and let Brad do the work.
Yeah, it's definitely not a comfortable position for them because we're bending them and twisting them into quite an uncomfortable position to get as aerodynamic as possible. And when you've got 6 times G's pushing you through that is not... Yeah, not
definitely
fun.
Stiff back this morning, that's for sure.
Because I'm just thinking where me and Eamon would sit. Is it 2 and 3, or would he go at number 4? What do you fancy?
I would be too frightened to do that.
GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's now 10 minutes to 2, and I hear you're a racist now, Father. Yes, the famous line from the Father Ted series, the wonderful sitcom. But Channel 4 has slapped a trigger warning on these episodes due to a 1998 programme featuring language and scenes of a racial impersonation.
OK, now, over in the United States, quite an interesting contrast, Disney is scrapping trigger warnings for its children's cartoons in a bonfire of diversity, equity and inclusion policies. So I guess the question is, why are things going in such different directions between the United States and here? And should we take a leaf out of the old American book?
Well, joining us in the studio is Spiked Tom Slater.
Hello.
Tom, this is a fairly interesting story. We see these stories all the time, but we never see quite as clear a distinction between sort of both sides of the Atlantic sort of peeling apart as we've seen today.
Absolutely. It seems like the vibe shift hasn't quite made its way over to this side of the Atlantic, but what you see at Disney is what you're seeing amongst a lot of Fortune 500 companies at the moment, which is they've recognised what way the wind was blowing. They've recognised that with the new administration coming in, it's another reminder that the public really have no interest in all the kind of woke pearl clutching which has been going on over the past 4 or 5 years or more. And also I think they've started to realise, as Disney have to their cost, that there has been a bit of a hit to their own bottom line by a lot of this. They've had a slew of huge flops, particularly in some of their kind of Marvel spin-offs, and particularly when it was things like She-Hulk, Attorney at Law, and things that seemed designed to enrage their fan bases just to tick off a few kind of diversity boxes. But over here in the UK, still not quite catching up, and Channel 4 continuing to carry on like a lot of companies were 4 or 5 years ago in the US.
Yeah, I mean, some of the things that happen in this particular episode wouldn't probably be included in a sitcom today. So the offending scene is where Ted appears to mock the Chinese by wearing a lampshade on his head, and he also pulls his eyes in different directions. And also later in the episode, he appears to look like Adolf Hitler with a mark and some dramatic hand gestures and all of this.
But that's a joke, though. I mean,
do we need... do people need to know that these things... need to be told that these things are offensive?
I don't think people need to be told that, like, Adolf Hitler is a bad guy and that someone who might be invoking that might not be someone that you'd want to be friends with. I mean, what's funny about that episode was, because I think you're completely right, it wouldn't get made now, but that's almost a bit of a problem, because Ted is the butt of the joke in that episode, as he is in many other episodes. He does this sort of racist caricature, gets caught out, and then for the rest of the episode he's trying to prove to everyone that he's not a racist, culminating in this hilarious...
He looks like the idiot.
Exactly, culminating in the hilarious scene where there's a perfectly square bit of dirt on the window which lines up with his mouth in a particular way, and I won't ruin it any more than I already have. It's clearly mocking racism. And are we getting to the point now where things are so sensitive, things are so uptight, that even taking the mick out of horrendous opinions is also not allowed, which seems to be where we're getting to now.
I mean, it does really sort of stretch credulity when something that clearly is not a racist programme, it is a programme that is designed to mock racism, is now included in this entire... But I sort of struggle to see how this is happening just now. I mean, we're in 2025. This programme was made, I believe, in the 1990s.
1998, this episode.
Why then... Is it only now that suddenly Channel 4 is putting this warning on if it has been so terrible for everyone for the previous 30 years?
I think it's an indication not that we're becoming, as a society, more clear in our view that racism is wrong. I think that was pretty clear to the makers of Father Ted back in the 1990s. It's that we've become more uptight about speech and offence. That's really what this is about. And if you think about all those examples of all the Disney trigger warnings which have been happening in recent years, you know, there was one on Peter Pan because of its depiction of Native Americans, or ones in The Jungle Book because King Louis is apparently an African-American stereotype. I did always wonder, who are these warnings for? I mean, if you look at polls, say, in America, actually ethnic minorities tend to be more
Tom,
rejecting
they're just
of PC
treating
than
people
white
as if
people.
they're children, right, always.
Yeah.
Tom Slater, thank you very much indeed. We'll have to leave it there. We've run to the end of the hour, but stick with us. We're going to continue our discussion of this judge's ruling that a Gazan family can...
A chilly start will give way to a lovely, warm afternoon. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Afternoon, welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. A similar day tomorrow to today. Most places grey, largely dry across the UK, and chilly again. If anything, tomorrow a little colder. Low pressure out west, high pressure out east, and we're kind of stuck in the middle. There's weather fronts trying to move in, but not making a lot of progress. In the east, we've got an easterly breeze, still bringing a lot of cloud from the North Sea. Western Scotland seeing some clearer skies, seen some sunshine here through the day. It means we'll see a frost overnight. Patchy frost elsewhere where the cloud breaks across northwest England, West Wales. Mostly, though, with the cloud cover, temperatures generally just about holding a little above freezing. Another pretty chilly start, though, to Thursday. Another pretty glum start. I'm a bit more optimistic that tomorrow there'll be a few more breaks in the cloud, a better chance of seeing some brighter skies at least. But I suspect much of East Anglia and the southeast will be overcast, along with the Midlands. Some sunny spells across West Wales, maybe Northern Ireland, and certainly Western Scotland should be favoured for some sunshine again through tomorrow. But with those clear skies at night, it will be a frosty start for many here. There will again be one or two light showers across parts of the east, but not really amounting to very much, and the vast majority will stay dry. Better chance of some breaks in the cloud, bit of brightness coming through over parts of England and Wales, particularly in the west. And in the far southwest, actually, thicker cloud later in the day as the winds start to pick up here. The eastern side will have lighter winds than today, but generally colder air is moving in, so temperatures are going to struggle to get much above 4 or 5 Celsius, so it will be a cold day even for February on Thursday. The winds strengthen in the southwest as a weather front starts to approach. As we go through Thursday evening, some rain trickling in. That will make slow progress across the country into the weekend. Most places staying cloudy and turning ever so slightly milder from the west.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We're doubling your chances to win in our latest Great British giveaway with 2 fabulous prize bundles up for grabs. There's 2 lots of a totally tax-free £10,000 in cash. You'll also receive a brand new iPhone 16 along with £500 in shopping vouchers to spend at your favourite store. And the best news is 2 lucky winners are going to win. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. 1 entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB11 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 2 o'clock on Wednesday, the 12th of February. I'm Tom Harwood.
And I'm Emily Carver.
A judge rules that a Gazan family can settle in the UK under a scheme meant for Ukrainian refugees. We'll be hearing from a solicitor as the Tories accuse the government of allowing enormous numbers of people to exploit our laws.
And elsewhere, is Donald Trump hitting his closest allies the hardest? That's the claim from Lib Dem leader Sir Ed Davey as he condemns tariffs against steel and aluminium.
It all comes as Heathrow announces a significant commitment by the airport to UK steel as part of its expansion plans. We'll hear from the Heathrow CEO in the next few minutes.
And an advert for high street retailer Next has been banned after featuring an apparently unhealthily thin model. Were they right to do so? We're hosting a fiery debate.
When Parliament legislates for a scheme for Ukrainians, I think it's fairly obvious that Parliament wants a scheme for Ukrainians, not for the entire world. If they wanted to do a family settlement scheme for the entire world, that's what they'd have legislated for. But not in the mind of one British judge.
I'm just trying to put myself in the, try and look at the psychology of thinking that you can sort of take such a expansionary view of our law and international human rights law and interpret the ECHR and all of this, so totally against what the government's actual policy is. Doesn't seem to make any sense. I mean, it seems a very arrogant decision to have made.
It's extraordinary, but then again, we do have some judges who think they know better than our politicians.
Absolutely.
Frankly, seeing the quality of many of our politicians, I don't blame them. But
at least we elect them. This is the thing. These judges are totally unaccountable to any of us. I mean, surely, we have to have, the last say in Parliament from our elected representatives.
Well, the Prime Minister says he'll be bringing forward new laws in order to close what he describes as a loophole. But the Prime Minister also got his facts wrong today at Prime Minister's Questions. He said that this was a ruling that occurred under the previous government.
Yep.
It didn't. It happened this year, under this government. And this was a strange point in Prime Minister's Questions because it allowed people to think the Prime Minister got the better of Kemi Badenoch because he had all of these facts. But he didn't have the facts.
No, he got it completely wrong, and he said it with such a sense of authority that, yes, people presumably believed him.
Here's a crucial point. If it's determined he's misled the House, which is a serious black mark in the House of Commons, he'll have to return to the dispatch box and apologise. Now, if there was a competent opposition, they'd be trying to get in touch with the Speaker and organise that perhaps this very afternoon.
And what was very irritating is that he clearly only answers the questions that he wants to. So he loved answering that question about the working from home from Finland, because he had his answer all readily prepped. He did not answer the question that I think we all want to know the answer to, about whether the government is going to appeal this decision and in what time frame. So there you go.
Well, we're going to be following that question of whether or not the Prime Minister has misled the House very carefully this afternoon. Might he have to return to that dispatch box, frankly, to say sorry? Well, we'll discuss all of that and more after your latest news headlines with Aaron Armstrong.
Very good afternoon to you. Our top stories. A review into the handling of the man who murdered Sir David Amess under the counter-terror programme PREVENT has found his assessments were problematic. Ali Harbi Ali, who was given a whole life sentence in 2022, had been referred to PREVENT 7 years before he killed the veteran MP in October 2021, but his case was closed 5 years earlier. Well, the review found the handling of his PREVENT case was suboptimal and it was closed too quickly. The government promised to publish the PREVENT Learning Review after the report into the Southport killer Axel Ruda Cabana's handling by the programme was also published last week. Sir Keir Starmer and the Leader of the Opposition have clashed over immigration at Prime Minister's questions. Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch repeatedly asked the Prime Minister why a Gazan family of 6 was allowed to come to the UK under a scheme intended for Ukrainians and if the loophole would be closed.
There are millions of people all around the world in terrible situations. We cannot help them all, and we certainly cannot bring them all here. Will he commit to bringing forward that new legislation or amending his borders bill?
Prime Minister. Well, Mr. Speaker, I've already said the Home Secretary has already got a team working on closing this loophole. We don't need to wait for that. We're getting on with that because we're taking control. They lost control of immigration. We had nearly 1 million people come into this country, had an open borders experiment. On a Monday of this week, they voted against increased powers to deal with those that are running the vile trade of people smuggling. Same old Tories, open borders, empty promises.
The Palestinian parents and their 4 children fled Gaza after their home was destroyed by an Israeli airstrike. They applied for entry via the Ukraine scheme in an effort to join the father's brother, who's a British citizen and has lived here since 2007. The Home Office says it rigorously contested 2 appeals at tribunal hearings after the family's application to live in the UK was initially refused. However, the second appeal was allowed over the rights to a family life enshrined in the European Convention on Human Rights. The Home Office has tightened the rules on becoming a British citizen, making it almost impossible for those arriving in small boats to apply successfully. Previously, refugees who reached the UK by irregular routes could apply, but only after being in the country for 10 years. However, the new guidance now advises authorities to reject applications if the person arrived illegally. It could prevent thousands of refugees from becoming British citizens despite having been granted asylum. A Christian school worker who was dismissed after criticising plans to teach primary school children about LGBTQ+ relationships has won a Court of Appeal battle related to her dismissal. Christy Higgs lost her role at Farmers School in Fairford, Gloucestershire in 2019 after sharing posts with around 100 friends on Facebook. One referred to brainwashing our children, another to suppressing Christianity and removing it from the public arena. Well, in the latest stage of her years-long legal battle, 3 judges have ruled in her favour, finding that a previous appeal decision which sent the case back to an employment tribunal was unlawfully discriminatory. She says it's a victory for free speech. Well, the government is to crack down on rogue landlords receiving housing benefit if their properties are substandard. It says a new licensing scheme and tougher standards will be unveiled next week. It comes as the Housing Secretary Angela Rayner announced a further £350 million to build more than 3,000 affordable homes and council homes in England. The Deputy Prime Minister has insisted her target of 1.5 million new homes in this Parliament is on target, despite house building in England falling behind over the last 6 months. Elon Musk has denied leading a hostile takeover of the US government on a surprise first appearance at the White House on Tuesday. The world's richest man joined Donald Trump in the Oval Office as the US president signed an executive order allowing Mr Musk and his Department of Efficiency to make cuts to the size and spending of the federal government. Well, Musk, who's an unelected official, and his agency have been criticised for a lack of transparency, but he has strongly defended his cost-cutting plans.
If the bureaucracy is in charge, and then what meaning does democracy actually have? If the people cannot vote and have their will be decided by their elected representatives in the form of the president and the Senate and the House, then we don't live in a democracy. We live in a bureaucracy.
And King Charles will host political leaders overnight at Windsor Castle. Charles is understood to have invited Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer as well as First Ministers from the devolved nations to dinner later. Some of those leaders will stay overnight and have breakfast at the royal residence tomorrow morning. It will be seen as Charles' second intervention in politics in the space of a week after Sir Keir Starmer and Angela Rayner joined him on a rare joint engagement to see a housing project. Those are the latest headlines. I'll be back with more at 2:30.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 9 minutes past 2. Now, the floodgates could open to a wave of refugees from Gaza. That's the warning from the Home Office after a Palestinian family was granted the right to settle in the UK under a scheme that was set up for Ukrainian refugees.
Yes, so after initially being rebuffed, the judge Hugo Norton-Taylor ruled that the family had the right to come to the UK on the basis of their right to a family life under the European Convention on Human Rights.
Well, he also ruled that the family's specific situation outweighed the public interest in keeping to British immigration rules.
OK, well, let's get the thoughts now of legal affairs commentator and former solicitor Joshua Rosenberg. Joshua, thank you very much indeed for coming on the show to discuss this. What do you make of the judge's ruling in this case?
The judge had to decide whether it was proportionate to this family's right to respect for their family life to refuse them entry or to allow them entry. This talk about Ukraine is a bit of a red herring. It's perfectly true that they made their application using the Ukraine family scheme form, although they acknowledged that they weren't from Ukraine, they didn't qualify under the Ukraine scheme. But they'd chosen to fill in this form as the best form that seemed to meet their circumstances. There isn't a scheme to resettle people from Gaza. But the crucial point, as you've been reporting, was the fact that this man, father, mother, 4 children, his brother came to the UK about 17 years ago, became a British citizen, works in a media organisation, has about an income of £3,500 a year, and is offering to move out of London, rent a house with 4 bedrooms, put up this family at his own expense. And the question was really whether there was this family connection between the 2 brothers, and whether not allowing this sponsor, as he's called, the brother who lives in the UK, whether not allowing him to bring his brother and his brother's family to the UK damaged the human rights. Now, you could say they've lived apart for 17 years, there wasn't this family connection, but the court said that you had to look at the potential connection and weighing up the proportionality of this, comparing their rights to their family life against the government's concerns.
Joshua, this is a massively expansionist view of the law, however one wants to look at it. So I suppose there are 2 things to look at here. Number 1, is the Home Office right in suggesting that if this ruling is sort of replicated across the board, this could open the door to many hundreds of thousands, potentially millions of people who would assume they don't have the right currently to come to the UK under the terms of the law as we all understand it, but under the terms of this ruling, now those people would have the right to come to the UK. That seems to be what the Home Office is saying.
The situation was expressed very clearly by the upper tribunal that this is not going to open the floodgates, and for the very simple reason that this is a family case, and many of the people who live in Gaza don't have relatives here in the UK who are British citizens who are able to support them if they come to the UK. It's not a question of anybody from Gaza coming, it's a question of people with family links. Now, you may say that the family link in this case is not strong enough, but the tribunal decided it was. But you do have to have a family link.
That opens the door, Joshua. Surely that opens the door to estranged family members of any war zone around the world, bringing their cousins, daughters, brothers, mothers-in-law, I don't know, any claim that could be equal to or greater than the family connection to brothers who haven't seen each other in 17 years.
This is only a ruling from the upper tribunal, and it doesn't have to be followed necessarily, particularly if it goes on appeal to a higher court. You're right to say that others will point to it and say they have relatives in the UK and therefore they should be entitled to come. But that's quite different from saying that anybody who wants to come to the UK can do so as a result of this ruling.
I mean, just looking at some of the previous cases that this judge has presided over. In 2022, he presided over the case of an Afghan, Ibrahim Ahmadi, who raped a 25-year-old while she was asleep in her flat. And Norton Taylor said he could stay in Britain because the Taliban would, in quotes, take a dim view of sex offenders. Another ruling refusing to deport a refugee who murdered his wife. Is it fair to question whether some judges in our system have British interests top of their mind?
I don't think it's fair to question a judge's decision in this way. I think the way to question a judge's decision is to look at the decision. And if you don't think the decision stands up, and you can certainly challenge the proportionality, after all, this judge overturned a decision from the lower tribunal. There are obviously differences of opinion as to whether this family qualified under family life. You can certainly argue that this decision is wrong on the basis of legal reasoning, but I don't think you should argue it's wrong on the basis of entirely irrelevant decisions taken by the same judge on a previous occasion.
Is it irrelevant if it shows a pattern of decision-making? Because judges have, they have quite a lot of space to interpret the law, don't they? Particularly when it comes to these immigration rulings. And in recent times, there have been some extraordinary ones. I mean, we're reading about a case of someone not being able to be deported because their son doesn't like chicken nuggets from foreign countries and the like. There have been other cases of rapists paedophiles being allowed to stay in this country because of their right to family life, because of their children and the need to have a father for their children, even though they've been convicted of sexual offences. So is it not fair to question, why some judges may be more lenient than others?
It's certainly fair to question particular decisions. This decision came out a month ago, and we haven't heard from the Home Office that it's seeking to challenge this particular decision. You would think that if the Home Office thought it was wrong, or that if it was going to open the floodgates, or it was somehow improper, or if this judge was in some way misinterpreting the law on a regular basis, that the Home Office would appeal. Now, maybe they haven't made up their mind, they've had only a month to do so, but it seems to me that if they really thought that this judge had got it wrong, in this case or in previous cases, they would have tried to challenge it.
I mean, that is the staggering thing, and this did come up at Prime Minister's questions as well. I mean, we still don't know if the government is going to appeal this ruling, despite the Home Office saying that it's an absurd ruling, that it doesn't agree with it, that it would open the floodgates. We don't know if they're going to appeal it yet.
And also, the Home Office seems to lose appeals in any case, often, with cases which seem bizarre to us. Joshua Rosenberg, really appreciate your time and expertise, legal affairs commentator and former solicitor. I mean, I can't see how it couldn't, open the floodgates. If you've got a claim from any conflict zone, not just from Gaza, there are millions of people who potentially have a distant relative in this country who could potentially put them up for a while.
And also, many of the conflict zones around the world have a different family structure than the sort of nuclear families that we are used to in the United Kingdom. I mean, there are many parts of the world that have massive families.
Yeah.
And just one member, well, could that open this right to family life loophole that then completely overrides the law as we know it?
I'd like to know how he's going to support that many family members and for how long he has the means to do so. Anyway, let us know your thoughts. gbnews.com/your say is the way to do so.
Of course, we reached out to the courts and tribunals judiciary for comment. They said they were unable to comment on individual cases.
OK, well, let's turn our attention to Heathrow, because it's going to undergo a multi-billion-pound expansion.
Yes, the CEO claims that London's airport is answering Chancellor Rachel Reeves' call to get Britain building by boosting capacity of many of the terminals and improving bus connections too.
Yes, the government says it'll also secure thousands of British steel jobs across the country, in particular in Scunthorpe, which is where our political correspondent Catherine Forster is today. Catherine, an exciting day for Heathrow and its CEO. They've been wanting this for a very long time, but also perhaps an exciting day for Scunthorpe and the British steel industry.
Yes, indeed. I wouldn't have expected to be sent up to Scunthorpe to talk about a London airport expanding, but that is because they're going to be using lots and lots of British steel. Now, we know that the British steel industry is in crisis in many respects. Here in Scunthorpe, I'm at the headquarters of British Steel, but the amount of our own British steel that we are using has fallen to a third from just half a couple of years ago. So we're using less and less of the stuff we make ourselves and importing more and more. And that's before, of course, Donald Trump, the new US president, slaps 25% on tariffs of steel into the United States, which potentially could then mean that we have more cheap steel flooding into the UK market, making it even harder. So this is really good news today for British Steel and the economy more broadly, because Heathrow, the third runway, now they're going to have to adhere to very, very strict targets for the environment to get the go-ahead ultimately. And of course, it will take a long time, even if it does get the go-ahead. But they've announced today that they are investing billions and billions of private money now into expanding Terminals 2 and Terminals 5. It's all going to be private investment, and they have said that they will be using, wherever possible, British steel. They've signed up to what they're calling a UK Steel Charter, and Sarah Jones, the Industry Minister, is saying that she wants other companies to do the same, to buy British and support British industry and British jobs. Now, a little bit earlier, I talked to Chris Curtis. He's the Labour MP for Milton Keynes North. He's also one of the members of this Labour growth group of about 100 MPs really focused on how we get growth. And I asked him if there wasn't a real conflict between chasing net zero, being more green, and getting that growth that we so desperately need. Let's have a look at what he had to say.
There is absolutely no conflict between making sure that we're not continually pumping carbon into our atmosphere and also making sure that we've got good jobs and growth here in the UK. The conflict between those two things ended decades ago. This government must do both. This government will do both. And I think you've seen from the very many announcements that we've heard so far that this government takes climate change seriously, yes, but is also determined to build, baby build, and get the British economy growing again.
Build, baby, build. He's channeling, of course, the Prime Minister who said that, channeling Donald Trump. The influence of Donald Trump seems to be just about everywhere, doesn't it? But this is a good day for British Steel and a good day for the economy more broadly. But I have to say that there are still concerns here, because one of the steel bosses said that the UK has an uncompetitive business landscape, partly because energy prices are sky high here. Now, this government promised to bring down our household energy bills by £300. I think we're still quite a long way off that.
Interesting that we got the words build, baby, build, but also that concern over UK energy costs. Perhaps the original phrase, drill, baby, drill, is what's needed. Or, as we heard on Tuesday this week from the French President Emmanuel Macron, plug, baby, plug, was his call at the AI summit in Paris, talking about France's nuclear power output, or as he pronounced it, plug, baby, plug.
What's ours? Wind, baby, wind.
Ours is just sort of nothing at the moment.
Nothing,
but
baby,
Catherine
nothing.
Forster, thanks so much for joining us live from Scunthorpe.
Isn't that one of the problems for British steel? I mean, a couple of you have written in saying, do we have a British steel industry?
Yeah, with energy costs so high, it's expensive to produce.
And the push for net zero, right? The
Yeah.
British steel being told you need to cut all your emissions when it's hugely energy intensive.
Thing is, Heathrow's third runway will produce so much private cash that they can afford perhaps slightly more expensive steel
I
for
hope
it.
so. Anyway, this is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Lots more coming up. Yes, an advert for the high street retailer Next has been banned after apparently featuring an unhealthily thin model. Were they right to ban it? We're hosting that debate after this.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. Maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Britain's newsroom. Weekday mornings from 9:30.
It's also about how children are taught to behave towards people who claim that they have a different gender to their biological sex. And what I'm really concerned about is particularly girls being told that they shouldn't challenge, say, a man in their changing rooms or a boy in their toilets because that is unkind. Joanne, do you think that's actually setting up girls to put themselves in danger for the so-called purpose of being kind?
Again, what you're doing here is you're using these very obtuse type comments to try and paint trans people as some sort of predators and going
I'm
into
trying to
changing
say
rooms.
that there's a reason that we have single-sex spaces, and if girls are socially conditioned not to uphold those single-sex spaces, we are going to have a huge safeguarding challenge.
So it's important that the education we're providing around gender identity, even non-trans people, about understanding your sense of self, I think is really important. I think schools today are doing a far better job than they did when I was younger in the 60s. So I'm not an education profession specialist in this area. I would advocate that education needs to represent the real world, and trans people are in the real world. If it means making girls more aware of their own sense of self, empowering them, giving them, working with them to
Helen, how is this empowering girls?
Say again?
I just said, moving on to Helen, how is this empowering girls?
This language of empowerment is not the right starting point when you're talking with children. Adults and children have totally different duties and responsibilities and rights and needs. In schools, it's up to the grown-ups to set rules that keep everybody safe. It's not possible to keep everybody safe if you pretend that some boys can be girls and some girls can be boys. That doesn't mean being mean or unkind.
GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
OK, well, get this. An advert for clothing retailer Next has been banned after it's judged to feature an unhealthily thin model.
Well, the advert, which was a product listing for denim leggings on the retailer's website, was deemed irresponsible by the Advertising Standards Authority after a single viewer complained.
A single viewer, OK. In its defence, Next said the ad was created with a strong sense of responsibility to both consumers and society, and while admitting the model was slim, they added that she had a healthy and toned physique that aligned with the nature of its product, its leggings.
Well, is it irresponsible to feature slim models in adverts? Let's debate this now. We're joined by the showbiz broadcaster and body positivity advocate Danielle Broadbent and the journalist and broadcaster Emma Trimble. Danielle, let's start from you. Did the Advertising Standards Authority get this one right?
Absolutely. I mean, loads and loads of brands sell leggings and they don't need to feature a super slim model to sell their clothing and their leggings. Now, from my point of view, the ASA are not saying that this woman is unhealthy. They're saying the way she's being styled and the way she's posing looks unhealthy. And with such a trend going on at the moment with curvy plus size models in the fashion weeks, the trends of weight loss pens and things that are going around, are we encouraging, when we see adverts like this, vulnerable young teenage girls who are quite vulnerable anyway with body image? Are we encouraging eating disorders? It's frightening. Now, this poor girl who's in this advert, she's very beautiful, and she's probably sat at home, because her body's now under scrutiny. And it just makes me so cross that society has given us all this such a hang up on body image, where we all have to, discuss what's too thin, what's too, what's too big. And I just think that, we need to just be inclusive of fashion's for everybody. So,
well, clearly this woman in this position isn't allowed, though. Emma, just to put the point that this could potentially encourage young girls and women to adopt rather worrying eating patterns, eating disorders.
I think it's ridiculous, and it's actually hypocritical coming from anybody who claims to be a body positivity activist, because this woman is perfectly healthy. There are people who look like this woman naturally when they're eating healthily, exercising healthily, and have a healthy weight. And so actually, in some way, they're body shaming her. It goes to either side of the spectrum. People can be so skinny that they are unhealthy, if you remember the sort of noughties heroin chic. But now things have gone the other way, and you have fat activists like Tess Holliday, who get held up as a kind of beacon of the body positivity movement. But that kind of obesity is also unhealthy. When you go into sports shops like Next, you see models that are on the heavy, or mannequins that model the outfit on people who would be considered to be plus size. I think the idea that society is somehow holding up anorexia as a virtue is just an anachronism. This woman is healthy. She's being body shamed for being healthy. I think people really just need to, and I know this sounds harsh, but I think they just need to get over themselves. It's this kind of scrutiny that is actually leading to people being so fixated on the way that people look.
I think that's
okay, Danielle, what do you make of that?
Nonsense. I think it's nonsense. I think that either way, Next, it has a plus size brand. And what they've done here, because we're seeing the rise of the Ozempic pen, we're seeing the rise of, the thinspiration vibes. I'm not body shaming this lady. I'm saying the way she has been posed, the angle, she's probably been photoshopped to look even thinner. All that hard work we've done in 2010 to be body inclusive to every shape and size is now being picked and pulled away to say that, there's no place for a plus size person in the fashion industry. And that advert just screams to me, if my teenage daughter saw that, would she be sat thinking, oh, well, my legs aren't as thin as hers. Can I not wear them leggings? The bottom line is, that lady on that advert, she's beautiful, and she probably is, healthy. She's very tall. Her BMI will be perfect, in a doctor's sense, but her legs do look painfully thin. And that, for me, as a curvy model, a curvy person thinks, well, I can't go and buy them leggings because my legs are nothing like that. And do they have my size? And I just think it sends a totally wrong message.
Okay, well, Emma, come back to that. Go on.
I mean, you just said you're not body shaming her, and then you said that her legs are perfectly thin. She's a healthy model. She's 5'9". She's a tall lady. Painfully. She's a she's a slim, tall lady. The only way this photo has been doctored is they've made the leggings look longer on her, obviously because they were too short because she is so tall. So the idea that she's been, please let me finish my
authentic. Why did they change her?
I sat quietly and listened to you, so please pay me the same respect. She stood, you said the way that she stood, the way she's styled, the stance makes her look painfully thin. Now, I just think that that's absolutely wrong. It's just the way that this woman looks. She's tall, she's slim. There are some people whose legs naturally look like that. I'm not one of them. But the idea that this is somehow modeling something unhealthy to people and should be banned by advertising standards is insane. It's completely over the top. It's completely oversensitive. And I often buy clothes that look very different on the models to the way that they look on me. I don't think people need to be seeing people who look exactly like them in order to buy the clothes. And actually now more than ever...
Okay, Daniel, we'll give you the last word.
Models.
That we're not looking to cancel out slim models by any means, but what we're sort of saying is, as the trend at the moment is, everything just seems to be. It is, the Bridget Jones movie that's out in a few days. Look at that film alone is an iconic movie, but it's all around, body shaming, plus size people. And the thing is, with this advert alone, I just feel that all the brands that sell leggings don't need to put somebody on there who, obviously, like you say, probably very healthy, but her legs have 100% been doctored to look even thinner, and that just sends to me the wrong message.
Well, Next haven't said that they've done that. I don't think that was the contention, but thank you very much indeed. We'll have to have another debate about Bridget Jones, because you raised that right at the end. Because Daniel Broadbent and Emma Trimble, thank you very much indeed for that back and forth. Fantastic stuff. I think that there are just some women who have skinny legs.
I think in the early noughties it went way too thin. But then we had this weird fat acceptance thing in the 2010s where you just had deeply unhealthy people in the other direction walking down runways. Perhaps we're somewhere in the right place now.
She looks like she's naturally that skinny. You can kind of tell, can't you, who's, starving themselves to look one way and who's just naturally that. Anyway, let us know your thoughts.
This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Plenty more to come. We're going to be live on Downing Street as the families of the Nottingham attack victims meet with the Prime Minister. All after your headlines.
Very good afternoon to you. It's just after 2:30. I'm Aaron Armstrong. A review into the handling of the man who murdered Sir David Amess under the counter-terror programme PREVENT has found his assessments were problematic. Ali Harbi Ali, who was given a whole life sentence in 2022, had been referred to PREVENT 7 years before he killed the veteran MP in October 2021, but his case was closed 5 years earlier. The review found the handling of the case was suboptimal and the case was indeed closed too quickly. The government had promised to publish the PREVENT Learning Review after the report into the Southport killer Axel Lukabana's handling was published last week. Sir Keir Starmer and the Leader of the Opposition have clashed over immigration at Prime Minister's questions. Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch repeatedly asked the Prime Minister why a Gazan family of 6 was allowed to come to the UK under a scheme intended for Ukrainians and if that loophole would be closed.
This is a situation where we need to put our national interest before the ECHR. Does he agree that we should legislate even if lawyers warn that this might be incompatible with human rights law?
Prime Minister. She complains about scripted answers and questions. Her script doesn't allow her to listen to the answer.
Prime Minister.
She asked me if we're going to change the law and close the loophole in question 1. I said yes. She asked me again in question 2, and I said yes. She asked me again in question 3. It's still yes.
Well, migrants arriving illegally in the UK in small boats or stowed away on lorries will be refused British citizenship under new, stricter rules. Previously, refugees who arrived by irregular routes had to wait 10 years before being considered for citizenship. However, the new guidance will include those already here, and it will be regardless of when they arrived. Almost 42,000 migrants who arrived by small boats since 2019 have been granted refugee status. Heathrow is to confirm a multi-billion-pound expansion today to increase capacity as it prepares for a third runway. Terminals 2 and 5 will be expanded. The layout of the airfield will be reconfigured as well in an effort to improve punctuality, and there will also be investment to boost bus and coach connections. It's separate, this development, from a new runway, and will be privately funded, with airlines and customers facing higher costs for those expanded services. That is it for the moment, but Tatiana will be here with more at 3 o'clock.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Yes, it's time for your weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Another fairly glum day out there. A lot of cloud around. A few showers, but many places dry. And again, on the chilly side, if anything, tomorrow's going to be a little colder. High pressure sitting out to the east. The winds coming in from the east, from the North Sea. So feeling particularly fresh on these North Sea coasts. A lot of clouds smothering the UK, but we've got some breaks in the cloud across western Scotland. Some sunshine here. A few showers coming in on that easterly breeze across southeast Scotland, eastern parts of England into the Midlands, but they're pretty well scattered, certainly nothing too heavy. The odd flake of snow over the Pennines, but chiefly rain and drizzle. Temperatures a touch below average for the time of year and certainly feeling cold with that breeze on these North Sea coasts. That will continue as we go through this evening and overnight, as will the holes in the cloud across western Scotland. So here, temperatures pretty quickly getting back down below freezing. I think we'll see the cloud breaking up a little bit more as we go through the night as well. That will lead to a bit more in the way of frost overnight. Certainly as we go through this evening, though, it's just cloudy. A few more showers coming in, Lincolnshire, down across East Anglia, perhaps the odd one into Kent and across the Midlands, perhaps even as far as East Wales, but few and far between, and certainly fairly light, any of those showers that do come in. Through the night, not a great deal of change. As I mentioned, a few more breaks perhaps in the cloud, particularly across parts of Scotland, but also northwest England may see a few more breaks. So the blue on the chart there suggesting there will be a frost, certainly in rural parts. Towns and cities dropping to about 2 or 3 degrees Celsius. A colder feel, though, on Thursday. A few more breaks in the cloud. Better chance of seeing some sunny spells. Western parts of Wales, southwest England, northwest England, again, western Scotland also. Generally speaking, many central and eastern parts staying overcast. The odd light shower, but most places dry. The wind's a little lighter, but if anything, it will be a colder day tomorrow. Temperatures for many struggling at just 4 or 5 Celsius. Bye for now.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Russell Holding. In Aberdeenshire, the A90 is closed in both directions between the Thornton turnoff and the Crosspoles junction at Marykirk after an accident that causing queues, especially towards Forfar. The M602 in Greater Manchester is blocked eastbound for an investigation between junctions 1 and 2 from the M60 Eccles interchange to Trafford Park, causing queues. Now in Lancashire on the A56, there's a lane closed northbound for emergency repairs between the Ramsbottom junction at Edenfield and the A680 Manchester Road, with delays towards and past there. On the M1 in Derbyshire, there's a lane closed southbound for emergency repairs between junction 29, the Chesterfield and Mansfield turn, and the Tibshelf services causing queues. And in London, the A124 is closed each way along Barking Road in East Ham after an accident in the early hours of this morning. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
OK, good afternoon, Britain. It is now 2:39. Now, the families of Barnaby Webber, Grace O'Malley Kumar and Ian Coates are meeting with Sir Keir Starmer today as they urge the Prime Minister to launch a statutory inquiry into Valdo Callacane, the man who killed their children.
Well, this comes after a major review found that significant failings were in Valdo Callacane's NHS care leading up to this attack, including detailing how he avoided taking his medication, claiming he was scared of needles.
OK, well, let's go live to Downing Street and speak to GB News political editor Christopher Hobe. Christopher, what are the families hoping to achieve?
Yeah, hello, Emily. Hello, Tom. A significant moment here for these families as they seek to understand what on earth happened, how this individual Callacane was able to act and kill Grace O'Malley Kumar, Barnaby Webber and Ian Coates last year in June 2023. Now, I've got a list of the group who's gone in moments ago to meet with Sir Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, the West Streeting, the Health Secretary, and Lord Hermer, the Attorney General. In there now is Ian Coates' son James, his wife, and James's brother Lee, Barnaby Webber's mum Emma, the father David, they're there, as well as Grace Kumar's dad, Dr. Sanjoy Kumar, her mum, Dr. Sinead O'Malley Kumar, and brother James. There are also lawyers there, so it's a very big, very important meeting for the families. They expect to receive confirmation from Sir Keir Starmer himself. There will be a full statutory inquiry into the failings that allowed or contributed to allowing this dreadful tragedy to happen in Nottingham back in June 2023. They want to hear a start date from the Prime Minister, who will lead it, and how it'll be led. They want to hear it at the start of this year. So lots of questions here from the families. Behind me is a group of microphones. We'll be hearing from the families straight outside number 10 Downing Street when it ends. We'll bring that to you as soon as it happens.
Well, brilliant stuff, Christopher Hope. This is, of course, a significant moment. The Prime Minister making a big political decision in terms of meeting with these families. What do we know about what the government says about the calls from these families for this significant inquiry?
The PM has said he wants there to be a public inquiry. He hasn't just called it yet. I think this meeting here is an attempt to focus minds in Downing Street, recognise it was June 2023, we need 2 years after that by the time this inquiry gets up and running. So they want answers, they want dates, who's running it, who's in charge, when it will report back. They want to see lessons learned, and that's why it's so important to the families.
OK, well, Christopher Hope will catch up with you a little bit later. GB News' political editor there outside Downing Street, where the families of the victims of Valdo Calicane's triple murder in Nottingham are pushing the Prime Minister for this statutory inquiry into what went wrong.
Yeah, and it's a big question, of course, because so much did go wrong in this case. I mean, it's fairly shocking to read the details of how this man was just sort of... The system had this very loose grip of him, and he was able to bounce between part of the system to another part of the system, avoid taking the medication that he clearly should have been on. This pertinent danger to society, left unmedicated and able to roam the streets, eventually, of course, killing 3 and injuring more.
Yeah, and it's worth noting how much work and perseverance the families, including Barnaby Webber's mother, have put into this. You know, going on broadcast media, speaking to the press, speaking to politicians, really pushing this forward in the public to try and get answers, to try and point out the failings along the way.
It can't be easy to relive that moment again and again and again, but... I mean, your heart has to go out to, well, particularly Emma Webber, who's been on this programme, and she's such a strong and tenacious campaigner. As are the families, actually, of all of those 3 victims. They're putting the work in, and hopefully it's going to yield results, frankly, for all of us.
Yeah, and I remember the trauma and the anger of the decision that he was going to go down for manslaughter rather than murder. You could feel the pain of that, couldn't you?
It doesn't feel fair. I mean, in the United States, he'd be called a murderer. In the United Kingdom, because the way that we describe this, it's manslaughter. It almost seems inadvertent, but it wasn't. It was planned. It was meticulously planned. And then those... I mean, I remember reporting on it the morning after, as soon as we learnt what was happening. It was just the most shocking sort of sense of unravelling events, learning just on how many parts of Nottingham this took place, and then the identities of those whose lives were lost.
2 beautiful teenagers just on their way home from a club night, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And then Ian Coates. Oh, just terrible. We'll bring you more updates as and when we get them from that meeting, what's being said, what's being decided, whether there will be a national inquiry, a statutory inquiry announced by the Prime Minister.
But perhaps you want to get away from all of the doom and gloom, the bad news in the United Kingdom. If you're in search for some winter sun, here's the forecast for some of those top European holiday destinations.
You're looking happy.
Well, the forecast looks good.
So you've sorted the travel insurance then?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations forecast.
Heavy showers and thunderstorms affecting the Adriatic coastline, but elsewhere it should be mostly settled. These heavy showers could produce quite a lot of rain, particularly across southern parts of Croatia, Albania and parts of Greece. Some thunder and lightning mixed in with those too. But as we move our way further west across the Mediterranean, it's largely dominated by high pressure, so largely settled, particularly for Madeira and Tenerife, where we're likely to see the best of the sunshine. Showers continuing for a time before becoming more settled.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations forecast.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point.
He's lying. Maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
I'm really pleased to see this story. It's the news that bowel cancer screening, the age for that is going to be dropped from 60 to 50. And this is really, really important because bowel cancer is one of the biggest killers, and more people appear to be getting diagnosed with bowel cancer in their 50s. Not entirely clear why. And there was an inspirational woman called Deborah James who I actually met when I used to be the Shadow Health Secretary, and I remember meeting her when she had her cancer diagnosis and supporting her campaign, and she sadly passed away a couple of years ago, but it was a phenomenal campaign, and I think did inspire the nation. And this is so important. So people in their 50s are going to be sent these kits in the post. And I suppose my plea is just do not ignore these kits because you can deal with cancer if you catch it early enough.
Yeah.
So
this is not the most pleasant thing to do, and a lot of us aren't used to it and talking about it and whatever, but it's essential, obviously, to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other reason I wanted to sort of flag this is, we can sometimes make ourselves sort of pretty miserable looking at the newspapers, but this is undoubtedly a good initiative that the government have done this, and that campaigners have persuaded the government to do this. So, look, I just want to plea to everybody watching, if you get one of these kits, use it.
And, of course, I think it's really important within that to point out that this would not have helped Deborah, because Deborah was 40 when she died. And what's really important when you see stories like this is to pay attention to what your body is telling you. And if you have symptoms that are weird, it is important to go to your doctor and to talk about them and to take the tests.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's just coming up to 10 minutes to 3. Now, there was an interesting moment in the House of Commons at Prime Minister's questions today. The Prime Minister seemed to belittle the Leader of the Opposition, saying he had the better of it, that she hadn't done her homework. Let's take a listen to what he had to say.
Mr. Speaker, let me be clear. I do not agree with the decision. She's right. It's the wrong decision. She hasn't quite done her homework because the decision in question was taken under the last government, according to the legal framework for the last government. But, Mr. Speaker, let me be clear. It should be Parliament that makes the rules on immigration. It should be the government that makes the policy. That is the principle, and the Home Secretary is already looking at the legal loophole which we need to close in this particular case.
So we've got the words there that the Prime Minister said. She has not done her homework because the decision in question was taken under the last government. At which point you see a bemused Kemi Badenoch. The Labour bench is going, has the Prime Minister's questions been won on that point?
We are, of course, talking about this judge's decision, Hugo Benedict Norton-Taylor's decision to allow this Gazan family to settle in the UK because of their right to a family life, because they have a distant relative by the sounds of it, in this country.
But was the decision taken under the last government, as the Prime Minister said in Prime Minister's questions? Well, we can go to the Tribunal's Decision Service of the government, which lists all of the tribunals that take place. We can see in black and white. It happened on the 28th of January 2025. That's this year.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because Keir Starmer seemed very sure very sure that this was in fact under the legal framework of the last government and everything was made under the last government and that Kemi Badenoch was silly to ask the question. But it turns out that actually Keir Starmer may have misled the Parliament.
This is a really significant point, because if a minister knowingly misleads the House, that is a serious, serious black mark. If a minister inadvertently misleads the House, they have to come and correct the record. They have to apologise before the House of Commons. And it seems very hard to reconcile these two facts. The fact that this judge made this judgment on the 28th of January 2025 with the fact that the Prime Minister said, and we can read his words word for word, the decision in question was taken under the last government. Why did he say that?
No,
it wasn't.
Why did he say that? Did he just get his facts wrong? Did he not read the report well enough? Was he briefed badly by his team? Did he think he'd just get away with saying that, potentially, if he says it with enough authority? Interesting what he said about Parliament makes immigration policy. OK, yes, it does, but as we've seen, it can be interpreted in all sorts of different ways, which is why we so often have foreign criminals being allowed to stay in this country despite committing various offences, including sexual offences and even murder, who are allowed to stay in this country because of the ECHR. Usually Article 8, isn't it? It's usually right to a family life.
Yeah.
That prevents people from leaving.
As we were saying at the top of the show, you know, such a significant potential cascading effect off the back of this judgment, given the tenuous family ties in this case. I mean, is every tenuous family tie now going to be approved off the back of looking at this ruling? But the Home Office says that this could open the floodgates. The Home Office says that this decision was wrong. We still don't know if the government is going to appeal it. And perhaps one of the reasons we don't know if the government is going to appeal it or not is they didn't even seemingly know the date of when this judgment took place. We heard the Prime Minister there say that this judgment happened under the previous government. It didn't. The judgment happened last month under this government. It's fairly gobsmacking to see that the Prime Minister, one of the most senior lawyers in the country in his previous life, could have got such a basic fact so terribly wrong.
Yeah, and also, what loophole are they going to close? It's not clear at all. Is it the right to a family life? It's not going to be leaving the ECHR, is it? Is it something to do with the Ukrainian resettlement scheme? What is this loophole that's going to be closed magically?
Well, I have a feeling that this story is one that is going to run and run. So do stay with us here on GB News, because up next it is the indefatigable Martin Daubney with the Martin Daubney Show, a name after himself, of course. But do, of course, visit gbnews.com/yoursay for all your thoughts on all the things that we've discussed throughout the programme today. And, of course, enjoy your latest weather forecast too.
Goodbye.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Afternoon, welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. A similar day tomorrow to today. Most places grey, largely dry across the UK, and chilly again. If anything, tomorrow a little colder. Low pressure out west, high pressure out east, and we're kind of stuck in the middle. There's weather fronts trying to move in, but not making a lot of progress. In the east, we've got an easterly breeze, still bringing a lot of cloud from the North Sea. Western Scotland seeing some clearer skies, seen some sunshine here through the day. It means we'll see a frost overnight. Patchy frost elsewhere, where the cloud breaks across northwest England, West Wales. Mostly, though, with the cloud cover, temperatures generally just about holding a little above freezing. Another pretty chilly start, though, to Thursday. Another pretty glum start. I'm a bit more optimistic that tomorrow there'll be a few more breaks in the cloud, a better chance of seeing some brighter skies at least. But I suspect much of East Anglia and the South East will be overcast, along with the Midlands. Some sunny spells across West Wales, maybe Northern Ireland, and certainly Western Scotland should be favoured for some sunshine again through tomorrow. But with those clear skies at night, it will be a frosty start for many here. There will again be one or two light showers across parts of the east, but not really amounting to very much, and the vast majority will stay dry. Better chance of some breaks in the cloud, bit of brightness coming through over parts of England and Wales, particularly in the west. And in the far southwest, actually, thicker cloud later in the day as the winds start to pick up here. The eastern side will have lighter winds than today, but generally colder air is moving in, so temperatures are going to struggle to get much above 4 or 5 Celsius, so it will be a cold day.